Chefs Without Restaurants, episode 147 with Sara Hauman.
I always thought that I was kind of dull and not creative. And I just do simple things like repetition. I just, copy people, but not in like a bad way, but in, like I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm just making food taste good and like look decent on a plate. But once I was around a group of other chefs and, you get this challenge and you're cooking and I'm looking around and I'm realizing what I'm doing is so far out of left field than what everyone else is doing. I took big risks and made stuff I've literally never made before on TV, even though you go on and you're like, don't do that, Sara, don't do that. Don't do things you haven't done before. But it's just like, I can only be myself, going back to why they really wanted me on reality TV.
This is the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast with your host, Chris Spear. Each week, I'll be speaking with food entrepreneurs and people in the culinary industry. If you're interested in learning more about our organization dedicated to helping people build and grow their food businesses, look us up on the web at chefswithoutrestaurants.com and .org, and on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Chefs Without Restaurants. Now, enjoy the show. Welcome to the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast. I'm your host, Chris Spear. On the show, I have conversations with culinary entrepreneurs and people in the food and beverage industry who took a different route. They're caterers, research chefs, personal chefs, cookbook authors, food truckers, farmers, cottage bakers, and all sorts of culinary renegades. I myself fall into the personal chef category, as I started my own personal chef business, Perfect Little Bites, 11 years ago. And while I started working in kitchens in the early 90s, I've literally never worked in a restaurant. What is up, everyone? My podcast guest this week is Chef Sara Hauman. You might know her as the yogurt queen from season 18 of Top Chef, or from her highly entertaining cooking videos on Instagram, where she's making some very delicious looking food. So after high school, Sara moved to the south of Spain. Upon returning to the US, she decided to go to culinary school, which she doesn't recommend, by the way, and we definitely get into that on the show. She spent the next few years working in restaurants, including Brandon Jew's Bar Agricole, and with some experience under her belt, she decided to return to Spain to work at the famed Asador Extabari. So we start the conversation off just kind of getting a feeling about where she got this love of food, moving to Spain with her dad after high school, and then coming back to the US, going to culinary school, and then her early restaurant days. We definitely dig into the culinary school thing. That's something we've talked a lot about on the show, and she falls on the camp of do not go to culinary school. So we do touch on that a little bit in our conversation. Sara talks about going to Spain and the whole process of how she ended up over there, how she ended up where she ultimately was working, and, some of the fun stories like the time she got in a little kerfuffle with one of the chefs there. And of course, we're going to talk about Top Chef. Sara was on last season's Top Chef. I think she won the first episode and ultimately was in the top 8. And part of our conversation around Top Chef was, I think Sara identifies as an introvert, maybe had some self-confidence issues, especially as the show started. And just, it's a challenging, weird environment. I think anyone would struggle a little bit. But it was really great as a viewer to kind of see her grow and evolve and get more confidence as the show went on. And now, if you've watched her Instagram videos, I think they're really great. She seems confident and really comfortable in front of the camera. And I think is, a real joy to watch doing cooking videos. She really opened up on this episode and talks about some personal things that I don't think everyone would even be comfortable talking about. So I really appreciate her coming on the show and kind of getting into some of the messy stuff. It's not all, over the years, she's amassed a number of accolades, and we didn't even really get into that on the show. And what has Sara got going on now? Well, she has started a company called Tiny Fish Co., where she is producing tinned sea treats from the Pacific Northwest. You should go check it out on Instagram at The Tiny Fish Co. She's always had a love for tinned fish. I think that's something we even saw a little bit of on Top Chef. So we talked about how she ended up starting her own company. So if you've always wanted to try recipes using tinned fish, she will definitely give you some tips for how to use it. But I think one of the best things to do is to check out her website and buy some of the amazing types that she's producing. And I did ask her what it means to be a chef, like I've been asking many of our guests this season. I did excise that out of this episode and we'll be releasing it separately. So if you enjoy this conversation, please check that out. That will be dropping soon. And if you're not currently getting the Chefs Without Restaurants newsletter, the link is in our bio, or go to chefswithoutrestaurants.org. You can sign up for it. I will not send you more than one email a week. It will be filled with some of my favorite recipes, gear recommendations, a reminder about this week's podcast. At some point, the algorithms are going to throttle me back and you're not going to see my stuff. But if you're on the email list, you will know what is up. So check that out. I really appreciate it. And the episode will be coming right up after word from this week's sponsor. Over the past 27 years, the world of the personal chef has grown in importance to fulfill the dining needs of consumers. While the pandemic certainly upended the restaurant experience, it provided an avenue for personal chefs to close that dining gap. Central to all of that is the United States Personal Chef Association. Representing nearly 1,000 chefs around the US and Canada, and even Italy, USPCA provides a strategic backbone for those chefs that includes liability insurance, training, communications, certification, and more. It's a reassurance to consumers that the chef coming into their home is prepared to offer them an experience along with their meal. One of the big upcoming events for the USPCA is their annual conference scheduled for July 7th through 10th at the Hyatt Regency in Sarasota, Florida. Featuring a host of speakers and classes, the conference allows chefs to hone their skills and network with like-minded business people, and is open to all chefs in the industry. For those who supply the industry, it's a chance to reach decision makers and the actual buyers of products. This will be the first time back following the COVID lockdowns, and the chefs are anxious to connect. And right now, Chefs Without Restaurants listeners can use promo code CWR50 to save $50 on registration. Please contact Angela at aprather@uspca.com for information on becoming a member, attending the conference, or exhibiting. And as always, all this info will be in the show notes. And now, on with the show. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great week. So to kick off the show, I like to get a little background on you. Let's talk about food and growing up. Like, did you always love food? Was it something that was important to you and your family?
So I always loved food. And I think I ended up getting into food because, one, it's a love-hate relationship with me. And two, I just growing up, I didn't necessarily have a lot of money, but it wasn't a situation where it occurred to me, as a kid. I just was a little bit living in my own little land. My family we would never really go on vacation per se. Vacation would be like a road trip to Illinois to visit my grandparents, which we all know. Yeah. It's that's a great vacation. But at a certain point, my parents are yelling at each other. They're yelling at me. Yeah, I get car sick.
Yeah, we had a camper, and my dad would just drag the camper to my cousin's house on Cape Cod and leave it there for a couple of weeks. And he and my uncle would put a new roof on the house, and me and my mom would hang out with my cousins. But that was it. Right. Besides, we went to Disney World when I was in 5th grade. Other than that, we never had a vacation in my whole life, which made me want to travel extensively when I started to get money and be off on my own.
Yeah, we didn't necessarily go anywhere cool, but living in San Diego, it's we would go to Tijuana for a day, or we would go Disneyland, which is in LA, would be our family vacation. But it could have been a lot worse. But at the end of the day, they were really good about taking us out to dinner as a family, probably once a month. And my mom, not really the greatest cook. My dad was fine. He was a little bit older. So he was in the Vietnam War in the Marines, and he actually was a cook in the military. But that's a different style completely. So we would go out to eat, but we would never go to Applebee's or the chain restaurants. We would go sushi or Indian food. And so that, I think, for me was like the coolest part of growing up. And that's where, I don't know, I think I traveled through the food that we were eating. And I was always the one, I wanted like the craziest thing on the menu. Whatever the craziest thing was, I wanted to eat that. I was always that kid.
Were your parents supportive of that? Were they all about letting you buy that weird thing that maybe they weren't sure you were going to eat?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would never not eat it. I pretty much always tried everything, very adventurous, but also so quiet, like deathly quiet. I never talked. So I think whenever I found something that I was excited about, you always know when I'm excited about something. I can't hide it. They would definitely try to at least encourage me to like get into it.
Yeah, last week my son, who's 9, insisted that we get eel when we went out for sushi. And he had it before, and it's been a couple times, and I don't know why, but he just said, I want the eel. I'm like, okay. I mean, you ate it last time, we'll get it. But my wife's like, are you sure you're going to eat it? And it's like, not a big deal. You're getting like one roll, right? Like if he doesn't eat it, I'll eat it. But he was insistent on that this time.
Yeah. Growing up for me, food was always there. Food was always around me, not necessarily the best food in the world, but I really did get excited when we would go out to dinner. That was the best thing for me. And I think because it was like traveling to a different culture, that's the coolest part about food still for me.
I didn't live in an area that really had a lot of, I guess what you'd call ethnic food at the time, but we went out to eat a lot. My dad was not adventurous at all, but my mom was. My dad worked Sears, so retail. So like 3 nights a week he had to work. So that's when my mom and I would go out and have like something special. So like we'd maybe go out to a Thai restaurant or something.
Yeah.
And then when my dad was home, it was more like steak, baked potato, salad type stuff.
Yeah, I guess growing up kind of like in Southern California on the West Coast, definitely a little bit luckier there. If I would have grown up kind of in the middle of nowhere, suburbia, chain restaurants, chain malls, all that good stuff. Probably not the greatest.
So did you work in food service like as a teenager? Did you get any kind of restaurant experience then? Or when did you start working in food?
I worked in retail when I was a teenager. Okay, so crazy story. My life's a little bit strange.
We love crazy stories. I don't want boring stories. No boring stories on this show, so bring it.
So growing up, everything was great, kind of like until it wasn't. I have an older brother. He had a lot of drug issues. So that we're 6 years apart. So when that was taking place, I was kind of like 9, 10, 11, 12, the good years, the years when things start changing. And so it kind of contributed to me just shutting my mouth and putting my head down and doing my work because there was already like the messed up person in the family. But that also takes a really big toll on, parents. So my parents split up when I started high school. And a couple years after that, it was when the chat rooms were like the cool dating spot.
Like AOL chat rooms?
Yes.
Yeah.
So my dad started going on those chat rooms and connected with a British woman who lived in the south of Spain. So he, in love, whatever, was like, gonna sell all his shit and move to Spain after I graduated high school and retire because he's a little bit older. And I was like, well, I'm tired. I worked really hard in high school. I am definitely like type A perfectionist. So I did sports. I did everything that I thought that I had to do to like please everyone in my life and got straight A's, but I was exhausted at the end of that. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go to Spain with my dad and it's going to be great. So I actually spent the first year of after high school in Spain, despite, getting accepted into like colleges and stuff, which is a little crazy for some people to comprehend, but it's okay. And then I I came back because, again, my brother was like going through some hard times and was like living out of his car. And I just was like, okay, I need to take care of people because that's what I do. I just take care of people. So I basically finagled. My mom was getting married. So I finagled her and her husband. They had like a small apartment that they owned. And I said, well, what if we pay rent on it so my brother could have a place to live? And that worked out. So I came back to the US, but I also knew that I needed to go to school to please my mother. So I said, well, I'll just go to cooking school because it wasn't necessarily like this huge passion that I had, but I just always loved food. I would do school projects about food. I loved eating food. It was a very special moment for me whenever I got to eat something. I don't know, like I just celebrated.
But no experience, like you didn't grow up in high school saying, I want to be a chef, I want to work in food, just something that was you're passionate about.
Absolutely not. I really loved science. I thought science was really cool. And I think food and cooking is a bit scientific. So I went to culinary school, but me being me, I didn't just like go to culinary school because I understand how much money it was going to cost. I got a job in a restaurant within the first month I started culinary school. So I was actually working in a restaurant by day and then driving about 45 minutes south to go to school. And pretty much I was up and awake from 5, 6 in the morning from work and then school. And I would do online classes for all the things I didn't have to be in school for. So I graduated before I was 21. But again, I was completely exhausted.
That's a lot.
It's pretty much, it's all or nothing with me, really, is what I'm realizing as I'm getting older. It's like, I'm either at 0% or 500%. There's no in between.
So looking back on it, was culinary school worth it to you? Or, I mean, I guess that's where I can finish that. Was culinary school worth it? Would you do it again?
No, definitely not. I don't think that culinary school is, I think it's a joke, really. You learn on the job, and sure, maybe in my first year, 2 years, working in a restaurant, it definitely helped me understand terminology and maybe practicing knife cuts. But at the end of the day, again, I graduated before I was 21, but it did nothing for me except for put me, like you said, in crippling debt. And now I have to work super, super hard, and I have to weigh my options. Do I want to take this job because I make less money, but I learn more? Or do I want to take the promotion because I'm getting paid more and I'm going to stay at this job that maybe I'm not learning that much at? So, I mean, I'm still in debt. I'm not from culinary school. I'm not going to be done paying my loans. So I'm 47. And that's shitty because ultimately, I'm sure how many people that you went to culinary school with are not in the food industry anymore.
Within like a year and a half, so many of them. I went to Johnson & Wales. I got a 4-year bachelor's, and I've said on this show before, it will be burned in my memory. I had to pay $404 a month for 10 years. And I had to defer that a number of times because of like, I moved and then, startup costs of moving to a new city. It's like I couldn't pay for 6 months. So then it just kept stretching out and out. But I wanted to go work at places I had interviewed at like Charlie Trotter's. And I don't think that would have been a great place for me knowing who I am now. But like, it was basically like a stage. Like, no, you have to come and work for 6 months for free and find a place to live. It's like, how the fuck am I going to do that? Like, no money and I'm paying back student loans? Like, that's insane. It's like, no, I'll go cook at this retirement community,
It was, it for me, I think after a certain amount of time, I just felt really stuck. I love food and I love what I do, but I just feel like I have no other option. I can't go back to school. I can't take out more loans. I did the same thing. I did a 4-year bachelor degree in culinary management. That doesn't fucking mean anything. But, sure, I did it. It cost $80,000, and that's so much money. And most of my loans were private loans because it's a trade school, basically. And so it's not even like, federal can't do anything. I'm stuck with these loans and it sucks. And I have made, like I said, a lot of decisions based on money and not based on happiness because I had to. I went back to community college for a little bit to defer my loans because I had to take so many credits to defer, but that's exhausting, too. I don't know. It's just, I don't believe that culinary school should exist. I think that, I was lucky enough later in life to be able to go work in Spain for free, basically, but you're going to spend less money and have more fun if you just, take out a personal loan, go to Europe, work around at a couple places.
I know a number of people who did that. They just reached out to chefs via the internet and said, I want to come work at your place. And they just packed a couple bags and headed on over there. And when you think about paying $20,000 to $50,000 a year for school versus like how expensive is it to live off your savings, to live in Spain. So you worked at one of the best restaurants in the world in Spain.
I did.
So can you talk about where you were working and how you ended up getting that job?
After finishing culinary school and having a few jobs in the San Diego area, I was getting a little antsy and like sad that, I'm living in the same place that I grew up in the same city. And I just never wanted to be that person who never left the city they grew up in. So I had a childhood friend who lived in San Francisco, and I just impulsively was like, I'm going to come visit you. And I went up to SF and I thought it was the coolest thing ever, having never been to really a big city other than LA, but that's just for school field trips or whatever. Being in a city like that, like a condensed city where you don't need a car and you take public transport, coolest thing ever. That was probably when I was like 22, I think. And pretty much six months, I think, after that, I decided I was going to just move up there. So that's what I did.
Throw caution into the wind and go on a new adventure.
I did. So I moved up to San Francisco, and I actually staged at some like pretty fancy places. Kind of like you, I got an inn at the French Laundry, and I did a stage there, not for like 6 months, just a couple days, and I did a tasting and everything. And I pretty much on my first day, when they were yelling, whatever it was, clean up or whatever, and everyone stops what they're doing and starts sweeping, I was like, this is not for me. This is way too crazy that I can't do this. But I went through the process and it was cool and whatever. But I definitely knew that level of fine dining was probably never going to be in my future. And then I had found Brandon Jew, who was a friend of a friend, and he was just opening Bar Agricole, which is now closed. But that was super exciting because he was telling me about butchering whole animals and that whole thing, kind of more like the Chez Panisse approach to food, very simple, rustic style. That was what got me really excited. So I took the job with him. And I was there for probably close to 3 years and moved my way up to sous chef and everything. But I had some life stuff happen, and I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to go to Europe and work, and I didn't really know how to go about it. So I Googled the 50 best restaurant San Pellegrino list, and I literally just started emailing every single restaurant and saying that I was interested in coming for a stage. And the ones that got back to me, I was always asking if they would house their stages. That was my main thing, is I knew I couldn't pay for it. So I was trying to figure out which place would house me and feed me and also let me work for free.
That's how I ended up working in Minneapolis for a while. It's not Spain, but same thing. I needed to do an internship or externship for culinary school, and I didn't have a car and I didn't have money, and I would be working for free. So I just started sending out like, all you have to have is on-site housing and feed me, and I'll come work for you for free. So I ended up in Minneapolis. It's not Spain by any stretch, but
yeah, because I had been to Spain previously, Asador Echevarri was literally like top of my list. That's the restaurant that I wanted to go to. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Of course, I watched the Anthony Bourdain feature on it, which made it even cooler. And they were luckily the first restaurant to email me back and say, absolutely, you should come. And so I was thinking, okay, it's going to be this 3-month thing. Great. And Victor, the owner and chef, is the one emailing. So it was just really funny and in broken English. But he said, no. You're going to come here for 6 months. And I was like, oh, well, okay, I guess I'm not going to argue.
Sure, why not?
Sure. So I worked really, really hard before that. I think I like called AT&T because I paid my phone bill like 3 months in advance just to make sure. And I tried to save as much money as possible, but I just got credit cards and went and did it.
What positions were you working there? Like what type of work were you doing?
So I was basically on the pantry station, on the cold station when I first started there. And then I got into a bit of a kerfuffle with the gentleman who was running that pantry station. It was a multicultural kitchen, and he was Japanese, and he basically talked to me at one day like I was a piece of garbage. And I was like, oh, no. You do not talk to me like that. So I was very upset. And the pastry chef, who was Basque and was a good friend of mine and who had worked there for over a decade, basically like grabbed me and was like, I asked Victor, you're going to work with me now. I was like, okay. So I started working in the pastry department, which was great because I do have a little bit of pastry experience just being around. And I worked with him on desserts. I worked with him on developing like the whole chocolate after chocolate program, Mignardis, etc. And I was able to, because I worked with him, go into the brasa and start grilling strawberries. But regardless, I got to touch the grill.
Very cool. I mean, there's very
Yes.
few people who've gotten to go do that. So
yeah, it's kind of like a hierarchy thing. It's like when Victor deems you ready, you can go into the brasa and then help plate, but there's no talking in the brasa. You have to basically look at Victor and anticipate what's coming next. And you got to pull the plates from the plate warmer, but at the right time. And there's certain things that only he can touch, and there's certain things that only other people can touch. But I think, not speaking Basque and being who I am with not talking or communicating with words a lot of times, I actually could read his face and could read his body a lot more than most people. So for me, I caught on super quick and was able to start basically helping through service on the savory side. And then I'd switch over and do desserts once that started happening. So I basically got to do like everything because I got mad.
that sounds like a great experience. Everyone jokes about staging, like the dude who swept the floors at Noma, who puts it on their resume that they staged, but they didn't really work. But it sounds like you had quite an experience and picked up a lot of skills and did some really great stuff there.
I definitely worked, which was nice because I also had heard those things where, you're going to stage and you're just going to go pick herbs. And, we didn't wear chef coats. You could if you wanted to. I wore a sweatshirt and a t-shirt when I was there, and we had not matching shitty aprons. And
I wouldn't expect that from a place of that caliber.
So on my, I don't know, it was my first week, and Victor's wife basically hands me the phone, and I'm like, why is she handing me the phone right now? And basically, since I spoke English, they just would always hand me the phone when someone was speaking English for an English reservation. So on top of all of the other shit I was doing, I was taking reservations in English. And the way they take reservations is in a really big book written down.
No computer POS system.
No computer, no nothing like that. So I would be talking to people on the phone and they'd be like, how do we get there? I have to give them directions. One day after work, I thought I was in trouble because someone's like, Victor wants to see you in the office. I was like, okay. Okay. So I go up and he sits me down in front of his computer and basically says, I need you to write a bio for me. And I'm going to tell you in Spanish and I want you to write it in English. And I said, okay. So I'm sitting there with Victor and he's dictating stuff to me and I'm writing it down in English and he's like watching what I'm writing and says, no, 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 no. I don't want to say it like that. I want to say it like this. I'm like, you understand. You just don't want to be typing right now, but your secretary, what's happening?
A little bit of everything then. Yeah.
A little bit of everything. It sure was.
You could write his biography at some point, right? Or the intro to a cookbook.
I think he already came out with a cookbook.
Yeah.
Definitely didn't make it in.
So I guess we'll jump forward a little bit. Were you on a show, Top Chef? Was that like something that happened this past year?
That was something that happened.
Yeah. How did that happen? Did you actively pursue going on the show? Like, were you submitting to be on, or did they reach out to you? Because I know it could go either way.
So I, being the introverted, quiet person that I generally am, unless I blow up at you because I bottled everything in for too long, I didn't do any of that. I would get stuff from Food Network here and there about like, do you want to do this program?
Guys, grocery games. Yeah.
Right. Like they would hit me up on Facebook and, it's just casting people reaching out. And I just never even thought about it, quite honestly. And I never thought I would be good enough to like do that sort of stuff too. And then I got a cold call basically from a casting person about Top Chef. And this was when I was still living in San Francisco. And I thought like, okay, I'll like go, I don't want to close the door to an opportunity. So I'll feel it out. So I actually went through the whole casting process and I bowed out at the last minute, basically at the final casting step where you have to go and meet the producers. And at that point, you're really, there's only a handful of people that won't be chosen at that point. So when I bowed out, the casting people that I had worked with were very upset with me. They were like, Sarah, just fly to LA and do this interview. We can't tell you that you're for sure going to get it, but like, just do it. And I didn't at all. I ignored all their phone calls.
Was it nerves? Like why did you go that far and then decide not to do it?
I was in between jobs and I had just finished my first head chef job. And despite getting a little bit of acknowledgement here and there, I had never been in that position before. And it was really hard for me personally, because I'm so hard on myself. And I never realized how hard I was on myself until I was the one in charge. And then I definitely, take that thing where, well, when it comes down to it, it's always my fault. I very much took that literally. And I got nominated for a James Beard Award. And for it just didn't mean anything to me because I was so focused on all of the things that I thought I was doing wrong. And I didn't really take those awards and acknowledgements as positives. I took them as, I don't deserve this. Like, they're only giving this to me because I'm under 30. They're,
we talk a lot about imposter syndrome on this show, because I have so many guests who they're not, they even say that I don't consider myself a real chef. And that's because people have told them they're not a real chef for whatever reasons. I think it's hard on so many of us to think that like we're deserving of the attention or the accolades or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. I just didn't think I deserved it. So I was coming off of that and the thing was the restaurant wasn't doing well. And I think that's a huge part of it. The restaurant wasn't doing well. It was a small restaurant and I thought that it was my fault. And the owner of the restaurant didn't not make me think it was my fault. And I knew that he was going to replace me. And I got very upset because I was like, you have to tell me, it was a whole thing, but I was in between jobs, and that was when the whole Top Chef thing happened. And then towards that end of the process, Melissa Perillo at Octavia in San Francisco had asked if I would help her out. She was going to get married, and she was like, I'd like you to run Octavia, which was also super scary because it had a Michelin star. And I was like, I feel like shit, like I feel like I'm the reason this restaurant's failing. And I know I'm like getting these awards, but I feel like I'm the person. I mean, I guess it also tells, normal people, just because you're getting awards doesn't mean your restaurant's successful. So I was like, do I want to go on TV or should I take this job? And the money, because
you need
have
money.
Student
you have
loan,
to work, right? Yeah.
I have to work. I've never not had to work. I don't have that luxury. I decided to take the job at Octavia instead. And I just thought like, I burned that bridge, that TV bridge, but whatever, it's okay.
What's the time commitment for Top Chef? How long are you away for? And is it, I don't know, is it the same this past year during COVID versus other times?
COVID was longer. Usually I think it's a 6-week commitment, but ours was like 8 weeks, 2 months.
It's a long time to be away.
It's a long time to be away, and living in San Francisco and thinking like, I still have to pay rent on my apartment, but I don't have a job, and I'm going to take this risk to go on TV and probably humiliate myself and do terribly, come out with zero money, feeling terrible about myself, no job. It just didn't seem like the right time. So like I said, I ignored all those phone calls and was like, cool. So this is never happening in my life. That's okay. It just wasn't ever anything I wanted to do either. I watched maybe the first couple of seasons, and I never strove to like be on TV. It wasn't a thing. And then the next year during the casting season, I had actually moved up to Portland that year. Literally the day after I moved, I got a phone call from LA. I'm like, who's this? I answer it, and it's the casting people asking if I want to go through the process again. And I was like, well, I kind of just moved. I can't. I have a job. Like, I can't do it. Wrong timing. Again, I was like, well,
they must have really wanted you. I mean, geez.
Yeah, that ship definitely sailed. And then the following year, I was like, you know what? Moving to Portland was great, but I think what I realized, shocker, restaurants are the same everywhere. I moved out of SF because I was getting burnt out on restaurants, and then I moved up to Portland to work in a restaurant, and it was the same. And I felt the same. I wanted to have a life. I didn't have a life. I wanted to make more money. I wasn't making more money. It was the whole 9 yards. I was still struggling. So I reached out to the casting people this time around. And
Remember
I said,
me? Here I am.
Yeah. I was like, hi, hello, I'm ready now. I'm ready. I feel more confident. I'm ready. And they were like, thank you. Casting's a little different this year. And I was like, God damn it. I really fucked this one up. Like, they're never calling me again. But casting was different because it was one of the all-star seasons. So they were bringing old cast members back, which I didn't know because I don't watch the show regularly. So that was the moment where I was like, well, this is definitely never going to happen. And the following year was 2020. And it was actually the end of March in 2020. And I was now working at this winery. I had just started there 6 months prior as their chef, and not a restaurant, very chill. I was working, I'd get to work at 7, leave at 4. It was awesome. I was living this normal life, but I was kind of bored. And all my friends still kind of worked in restaurants. And just because I had this normal schedule, I wasn't doing anything with it. I was just going to bed earlier. And I felt kind of guilty almost when the pandemic hit that I didn't work in a restaurant. And I had just kind of made this move to work at a winery that was, sure, they were struggling, but people were drinking a lot of wine during the pandemic. They didn't necessarily struggle. There's still money in the bank. I wasn't going to get laid off. Like my job was very easy. And I really felt this desire to do something to help. You know, I had friends who owned restaurants that were just struggling. And so I hooked up with Chef Speed, I think, which is now Tastemade, and did like a very strange for me, but I did a cooking class, a live stream cooking class, and I raised money for it.
What were you making? What kind of class?
I made gnocchi. And it was probably like close to 100 people in my class, which was crazy. And I was so nervous, but I just did it. And afterwards, I had this like crazy adrenaline rush and I couldn't slow down. And it was so fun. And of course, in the grand timing of my life, I looked down at my phone expecting a text message from friends or a boss who watched it and was like, "You're crazy. What are you doing?" But instead, it was a text from the casting people at Top Chef. And I was like, wait, this is so weird. What's happening? And in all the adrenaline, they were like, "Do you want to go through the casting process?" And I was like, yes, I do. I do want to go through the casting process. So I did it again. And then I actually went on the show finally.
It worked out for you.
Yeah.
Did your confidence grow during the show? Because I feel like as a viewer, I saw that. Like it seemed like you came in very quiet, reserved, and you've already talked about being a little bit that way. And I think like once you started to see some success, like, oh, I'm actually doing. Did you win the first episode?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it just seemed like you started to kind of snowball. Like you found your rhythm, and were like, oh, I'm actually like really good at doing this.
Yeah. Like I said, regardless of awards and whatever, I never really held much credit with those, just because I am nominated for James Beard doesn't mean the restaurant I'm working at is successful or bringing in money. And that's more of the thing that I look at, because that's something I look at every single day. So people weren't coming in the restaurant and I was getting these awards, and that's great, but like, it just doesn't mean anything if you're not working in a successful place. I guess there's a bigger picture and a bigger story. So I have always just been incredibly hard on myself, like incredibly hard. And I'm dealing with it now, now that I understand it's an issue that maybe not everyone deals with on the level I deal with it. So I definitely feel like my confidence grew. I didn't think I could, I just knew. I was like, I'm going to be the first one off and I'm going to go home and I'm going to feel super shitty and I'm going to just delete all my social media and pretend like it didn't happen and go about my stupid little life and be happy and content with being averagely average. It's just like, I had it all planned out.
Well, and there has to be a balance somewhere because there's ego. I mean, I've definitely, not just on Top Chef, but seen like those chefs who like come in and they're like, I'm going to win this whole thing. I've worked at 3 Michelin star restaurants and whatever. It's like, nobody wants to be that guy either. I mean, like, bravo on your confidence, but like there's a fine line there, like walking that balance between confidence and arrogance.
Absolutely. I think I always just, when I exhibit any sort of confidence, I basically think that it's almost a bad luck charm. Like if I go in with the mindset that I'm going to kill it, then I'm very much not going to kill it because it's karma and I shouldn't be this confident and I shouldn't be a narcissistic asshole. It's a constant battle I'm fighting in my head with think positively, be confident, speak things into the universe. And then my other part being like, don't be stupid. That's not how that works.
And it's not a natural, like being on the show. I mean, I haven't been on it, but it's not like a natural environment. It's like weird, right? I'm sure you can say, it's not like reality of working in a kitchen, but just like the whole competitiveness. Like I love working with people, but I don't always love working in groups, if that makes sense. Like I was the one who always hated like group projects in school. And there was always someone who wanted to like be in charge. I'm just like, tell me what to do. I want to be worker bee as much as, I have my own businesses now and stuff and I have my vision. I'm always just like, path of least resistance. Like this person clearly wants to like tell us what we're making. Just let's make that. And I'm okay with that.
I think the biggest takeaway that I got was I always thought that I was kind of dull and not creative, and same, like I just do simple things like repetition. I just, copy people, but not in like a bad way, but in, like I don't, not reinventing the wheel. I'm just making food taste good and like look decent on a plate. But once I was around a group of other chefs and, you get this challenge and you're cooking, and I'm looking around and I'm realizing what I'm doing is like so far out of left field than what everyone else is doing. And of course, I'm sitting there thinking like I've made a terrible mistake. But at a certain point, you can't turn back because you have a timer on you and you have limited ingredients because it's what you thought of and what you purchased at the grocery store. So you kind of are forced to go with it almost. And because I was forced to just complete my thoughts and then I would do well, it was this like almost mind-blowing moment for me to be like, oh, holy shit, I've never completed anything. I've not completed my thought ever. I've just been thinking, like, playing it safe because I thought that's all I was capable of. And I'm capable of so much more. I just had no idea. It forced me basically to be so uncomfortable. Like, I'm like, well, if I'm going to suck, I got to just keep going. And then I would go and be like, oh, it's so creative or whatever. And I'm sitting here like, oh, I took big risks and made stuff I've literally never made before on TV, even though you go on and you're like, don't do that, Sarah, don't do that. Don't do things you haven't done before. But it's just like, I can only be myself, going back to why they really wanted me on reality TV. Now I'm realizing that.
You just have to, I guess, commit to it sometimes, right? Like just figure it out. I mean, I don't know that my brain works like that though. Like in a quick fire, I think I'm more methodical about how I plan out my dishes and stuff. And that's my biggest fear, because I've had people reach out to me. I went through the casting process for a Food Network show, and kind of like you, I backed out at the last moment. Like I did a couple interviews and I'm just like, I don't know, that self-talk got to me. And I'm like, this isn't the right thing. This isn't how I like to cook. It wasn't the right opportunity. I don't know. Maybe it'll happen someday, but I'm like, I found kind of my comfort zone and what I like to do. And I don't know.
Even if you're really, really good at cooking on your feet and quick fires, or you're methodical, at the end of it's just like an athlete. You're not 100% every day. You're not going to have a great day. I'm going to be honest with you. I recently put myself in another situation because I was like, well, I did okay the first time. Like, I'm going to just try another thing out. And I didn't do great. I did really shitty, and I was really, really hard on myself. And, but again, it's like, I wasn't in the right mindset to do it. I have a lot going on, and it's just because you're good at it one day doesn't mean you're going to be good at it the other day. I think it's more about putting yourself out there and being okay with putting yourself out there. And that's, for me, of course I would go on Top Chef again because it means more to me to build my confidence as a human. You're going to fuck up for sure. I'm not that special. Like, I'm never going to win a competition show, literally. Ever.
Oh, you might. Oh, come on.
I don't think so.
But we're also in such a weird time. I mean, we're hopefully kind of winding down with the COVID thing, but it's been a weird 2 years. Like, I think everyone's going through the stressors of life and have this extra layer or two of things, whether it be someone got sick or passed away, or you lost a job, or someone lost a job, or like there's a lot going on right now, and we all need to cut ourselves a break. It's tough times.
Yeah, I'm trying. Again, being an introvert, and I had a lot of stuff happen. I was on TV in the last year and a half. I did a crazy competition. I quit my stable job. I opened a business. And I am so triggered by all of these things that all of my tics and my quirks and whatever else in my brain is happening, like all of those things are 100-fold for me right now. And it's a lot to process.
And you're on display. I mean, we talked
Mm-hmm.
before the episode a little bit about how, you feel like you have to be on social media, you have to be on Instagram, you have to be creating.
Absolutely.
That opens the box for everyone in the world to come and have an opinion about you, and not just about your work, about how you look, about
How I
you
look,
sound, about terms you use. Like, you're on stage now for everyone to take a shot at you, and from behind a door where you don't even know who that person is necessarily. And that's hard.
It is. It's super hard. And I've had, I'm not any, I'm not more special than any other female growing up in the society, but everyone has body image issues, and males, females, but it is different for females. And being so in front of the public, so public facing and on social media all the time, it's ever present to me that all of the things I obsess over and I've always obsessed over, but I've kind of like keeping it inside. I can't keep it inside anymore because I'm so triggered by all these things and they're really coming out, and it's been so difficult. And I wish it wasn't that way, especially for females, but it just is.
But did you come back with more confidence? Like, did you come back from the Top Chef experience with a renewed sense of, or whether it's finding yourself or just feeling more confident in yourself and your abilities?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think confidence in my cooking for sure. I think for me, it's a crossover. Like cooking isn't just something I do. I'm a very I have a lot of emotions, so when I'm happy, I know people can taste that in my food. And if I'm upset, I don't like cooking because I feel like the food tastes bad. So for me, it was more about fixing myself as opposed to fixing my food. So I ended a very long, not awesome relationship because I finally spoke up and said something because I needed to think about me. And instead of feeling like, well, I'm going to be a dick for doing this, I was like, you're not happy. You need to say something. So it was a lot of speaking up and saying things, which I think, bosses at work were like, where are all these emotions coming from? And it's because I haven't said anything and now I'm saying things. And that's another hard introverted thing where, you're constantly the person who doesn't ruffle feathers, and you get this confidence to finally do it. And you're smacked down all the time. People are like, you're you're the pushover. You're the easy one. You always say yes to everything. What's the problem now? So I think for me, it was, I'm continuing to speak up and I'm continuing to fail miserably, but I'm just happy. You got to keep doing it because you can't be that person unless you're that person. It was just a lot of realizing that I let people take advantage of me and step on me because I'm nice, and it sucks. It really, really sucks. And I still am a people pleaser, and I still want everyone to like me, and I still don't understand when they do. And I'm super nice to them. And, letting it go, I think is on my list of 2022 resolutions these days.
Yes, I'm with you. It's hard, especially the more you put yourself out there, now as someone who has I have to reach out to people for business inquiries and doing deals and stuff like that. And the rejection or just the not responses, I go into my head really quickly. Oh, I sent this person, there's this person I really want to have on the podcast. I sent them an email. They didn't even get back to me. Why aren't they even responding?
Oh yeah.
Mine just goes in this weird place where it's we all just have a lot going on, and maybe they overlooked it, or just the amount of time someone reaches out to me with a really nice message that I don't get back to them,
Yeah, I am also, I'm that person. I'm I'll sit there and stare at a wall and overthink someone not responding to a text as opposed to getting my work done.
Well, let's talk about tiny fish. You like
Yeah.
you're excited there. There you go. I got you going. So, what's this new endeavor you have with the Tiny Fish Co?
Yeah. So I've always loved tinned fish. It wasn't something that I thought like, I'm going to make tinned fish. I've always wanted to make a product, and I'm fascinated with like factory food, as weird as that sounds, how to make things shelf stable, like looking at all the jars on the shelves and you walk by them. Like it's kind of cool when you think about it. You take food and you can just let it sit on your counter. That's
It's
awesome.
overwhelming though. Like,
Yeah. I actually, when I moved from San Francisco up to Portland, a big factor in that was never going to trust myself and believe in myself enough to do business in San Francisco because it's too expensive. So moving to Portland was a step towards giving myself, I wanted to give myself a fair chance to succeed. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to do that in a bigger city because of money. I always think about money.
it's important. I mean, it's something you need to get by, right?
Yeah. So I moved up to Portland and really wanted to work on it. Basically, it was general my fish idea, whatever my fish idea was. The one thing I would always make in restaurants in the Bay Area, we got really great fresh anchovies, and I would pickle them Spanish style and make boquerones. And whatever I did to them, people loved. And I would convert, oily fish haters into oily fish lovers. So I was really working on trying to figure out how to do the boquerones, but being me and wanting to use local stuff, and anchovies really don't come up to Oregon much. They're more bait fish and food grade fish. They're graded differently is the whole thing. So as I was kind of calling around and getting into it and finally like, cool, I went to like a HACCP school and I did my whole HACCP plan. All of this was kind of culminating around that March 2020 date. And it didn't seem good to me to work in a commissary kitchen at that point to produce a product. And I also, I was like, okay, I don't want to sink money that I've worked really hard for and saved into this if like we're all going to die in some crazy zombie apocalypse. This is silly. So it was kind of the more like, I'm going to live my life situation. And of course, Top Chef happened, and I really always have wanted to open a boutique cannery, as I said on the show. It seems so cool to me. It's just so cool. And I don't know, I just made it happen. I found a manufacturer, and I didn't know anything about co-packing and manufacturing when I first thought of it. I'm looking at cannery equipment and asking around in the industry to like actual canneries and figuring out infrastructure stuff, how much money it's going to cost. And it is incredibly overwhelming. And then I got a random email from someone who was like, hey, we'd like to maybe partner on you with some more chef inspired recipes for our tinned fish. And I went to go visit them up in Washington and was explaining what I wanted to do. And they were like, well, we know we wanted to hire you, but maybe we could actually help you out and you can start doing products. And it just all happened really fast.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I stocked up on sardines for the zombie apocalypse. I remember, I've always liked sardines. No one else in my house likes them, but I just remember going to Costco when they said like, go shopping this week because we're shutting everything down for, 2 weeks or the foreseeable future. Like I had no idea. And there was like no food on the shelves. I'm like, well, I like these. So I bought like way too many sardines that then I had to figure out what to do with. What are some of your tips for like, I know there's a lot of really great high-end canned fish out there these days, but like if someone just went to their grocery store and just bought like a can of sardines, like what are some of your favorite quick, easy dishes to do with them?
I like to go super crazy with it, of course. Basically, if it's completely basic, I don't like doing it, of course. I got to make my life difficult on myself somehow. Sardines on toast, of course, is delicious. Sardines and pasta is, of course, delicious. I think canned fish is great in okonomiyaki, cabbage pancakes, super delicious. I'll toss that in there. Any sort of like kimchi pancake, also super tasty.
I've never done that with those.
Yeah,
I'll have to add those to my list because those are dishes I love, but I'm usually like pork belly or bacon in there.
right.
So go with the
Yeah.
sardines.
I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
if you think about it, like smoked
Yeah,
oysters,
yeah.
smoked mussels, they
That's
kind of have that
smoky.
same flavor. So I do that. Obviously, like grilled cheeses. People are weird about cheese and fish, but I think it goes really well together, especially canned fish. I think fish is great as to help like soup bases get a little bit more body. Obviously, rice bowls are pretty incredible. I think today I'm about to make a video on doing a Thai style omelet. So I'm gonna finally, I got my packaging is like on its way to me today. So I'm gonna be releasing rockfish and soy sauce hopefully by the end of the week.
Nice. I saw on your website coming soon.
Yeah, not soon enough. I'm a very impatient person. So I'm working on recipes for that. But like Thai style omelets, putting it in any fish and egg is delicious. I love Spanish tortillas, so I'll pop it in Spanish tortillas. I think sardines, especially, I will make that into salad dressing. Super easy.
I think it's a tough sell to most people, though. Like when I put that stuff on menus, people don't want to order that. I feel like if I put it into like a chef's course, they'll eat it. But if I put that on a menu, they kind of shy away from that.
You got to hide it. I try to trick people into eating certain things. Then when they eat it, I'm like, ha, gotcha. You like it.
I do that with organ meat. I'm a big fan of cooking offal, and it's like nobody's gonna order that. You know, it's like I do like a tongue sauerbraten, and people are like, oh, I mean, it just made sense to me. It's like a tough piece of meat, and it's like, oh, marinating it in vinegar and wine for 3 days. That's a fix right there, right? But it's not the first thing that sells on my menu.
Yeah, I've done like corned beef tongue.
Yeah,
one thing that I loved doing because it just made sense to me, and people didn't necessarily know what it was.
You're also the yogurt queen, right? Like I think you're the spokesperson for yogurt. Is that right? Like, you haven't did you
shockingly
did you
no.
get any like brand deals or
no shockingly
really?
No, it's okay.
You got to keep just working that.
It's not for not trying. Like I had a PR company and everything. No, definitely no yogurt deal.
I just don't think yogurt companies are good. Like I work with yogurt a lot and I'm always like tagging them on Instagram and like they don't even necessarily like my posts. It's like, how do you not love that? This is amazing. Like I'm making lebno with your yogurt and then I do this like super creative dish and like you're just selling like plain yogurt. You could sell way more yogurt if you had someone working with you doing cool things, but we're not there yet. I want to get them as like, you know, find the right one to be a sponsor for my podcast, but I don't think that's gonna happen.
I mean, I'm kind of doing this. It's the same regardless of whatever. People with marketing brains and marketing backgrounds have a specific marketing story they want to tell. And if you're not part of that story, it doesn't matter how much you tag up or how much you're called the, yogurt queen. It just doesn't matter. You kind of have to fit the image of whatever they're trying to promote right now.
Yogurt with fruit and granola. And
yeah, I mean, it's all image these days. It's all videos. Everyone's in front of the camera. So, again, it just makes it a little bit hard because it's not just about the food. It's about the person behind the food now. And I think that's a big thing these days, especially with cooking, that it literally isn't just about the food. It's about the story, the chef, the story of the chef, and it makes it difficult. The cool part about my products too is that I put a lot of emphasis on me as a chef and how I operate in a restaurant and try to put that into my products. So first thing you see is the packaging. And if working with me, I like to crack jokes, so there's a joke on my package.
No, there's some great packaging. It's fun and funny, like looking on the website and like having merch and stuff like that. It shows your personality, right? And I guess, how do you stand out? I mean, there's so many products on the market. I think you need something. And for good or for bad, so much of it comes down to marketing. Like I think of beer, like you go in the beer store and it's like looking at all the can artwork these days and the label artwork. It's like, how do I pick out an IPA? You're like, oh, that one has like Star Wars on the can.
Exactly.
Cool. I'm going to buy that. And I don't even know if it's better or even good, but it's like, it jumps out at me.
Yeah, it is how it is. I really wanted to make my personality a part of the entire product. So, you've got the packaging, which is great and beautiful. And I love my designers who did it, because they somehow got whatever was swirling around in my brain onto a box. And, and then as far as the fish goes, I really want to focus on being super local in the Pacific Northwest and making sure that sourcing local sustainable food is still a part of the actual company. So, a lot of tinned fish comes from abroad. A lot of domestic tinned fish brands source fish from abroad, and that is fine, and that's their business, and whatever. But I think there is a gap in the market with finding how to market fish domestically produced beautifully as well. Just because I don't have a marketing background, just because I'm a chef doesn't mean I'm stupid and don't know what I'm doing.
And it has like that chef feeling, chefs like to source locally and, like a good craft product and stuff. So I think that'll come through. Thank you for the time. Of course. Yeah, I really appreciate having you on the show. This has been great. I hope you had a good time.
I did. I think being on Top Chef too, along with, confidence booster and whatnot, it's being able to share some of my struggles that I have, not only as a chef, just as a normal functioning human, has been really helpful to me too, as someone who's always been so quiet about certain things. To be able to finally speak up, you realize you're not so alone in the world. So for all the introverted weirdos,
we don't want to just talk about the good stuff. This isn't just come on and pump yourself. It's like, let's dig in and talk about the hard stuff on this show too. And
absolutely,
it's, because life is hard. And I think a lot of people, especially on social media, there's a lot of fronting, and you show the world what you want them to see or what you think they want to see. And things aren't always that easy. So if you can be open enough to come on and talk about that, that is fantastic.
Yeah.
Have a great afternoon.
Thanks
so much.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast. And if you're interested in being a guest on the show or sponsoring a show, please let us know. We can be reached at chefswithoutrestaurants@gmail.com. Thanks so much.